Lena always believed that success meant standing taller than everyone else. From the moment she joined the company, she had worked hard to reach the top. Years of long nights, endless meetings, and sacrifices had finally paid off. Now, she was one of the youngest senior managers in the building. People respected her, or at least they feared her enough to act like they did. Every morning she walked through the glass doors of the office with her head held high, heels clicking on the shiny floor. Her assistant would rush to hand her a coffee, and her team would straighten up when she passed by. She liked the feeling of control. To her, it meant she had made it. The company she worked for was one of the largest business firms in the city. It handled big clients, million-dollar deals, and contracts that could make or break reputations. Everyone wanted to impress the directors, and Lena had become known as one of their most dependable people. She was smart, fast, and confident, but along with her success came something else, and pride. She didn't notice it at first, but it had quietly grown inside her over time. She had little patience for those who worked under her. When interns asked questions, she often sighed or rolled her eyes. When assistants made mistakes, she would point them out in front of others. Her coworkers respected her skills, but some whispered that she lacked kindness. Still, she didn't care. In her mind, being nice never got anyone promoted. One Monday morning, as she entered the office, she noticed a new face sitting at one of the desks in the legal department. He was a man in his early 30s, wearing a simple shirt and carrying an old leather bag. There was nothing fancy about him. No expensive watch, no stylish clothes. He looked calm, almost too calm for such a fast-paced office. Her assistant leaned over and whispered, "That's the new temp. They brought him in from an agency to help the legal team for a few weeks." Lena nodded, uninterested. "Make sure he doesn't get in the way," she said, walking past without a second glance. Later that day, she saw him again near the copier. He was quietly organizing files, reading through documents like he actually cared about them. When she asked him to bring a set of papers to her office, he did it immediately and politely said, "Here you go, ma'am." "Thanks," she replied, not looking up. From that day, she saw him around the office often. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, but when he did, his words were calm and thoughtful. He helped anyone who asked, even if it wasn't part of his job. But to Lena, he was invisible. Just another temporary worker who would be gone in a few weeks. What she didn't notice was how observant he was. He paid attention to small things that most people ignored. When the finance team struggled with a misplaced document, he quietly found it. When someone spilled coffee on an important file, he stayed late to reprint and organize everything. Still, he never made a show of it. One afternoon, during a team meeting, Lena noticed him sitting in the back corner listening carefully. He wasn't part of the team, but he had been asked to take notes. When she finished her presentation, she asked sharply, "Any questions?" He hesitated before speaking. "Just one," he said softly. "On page 3 of the proposal, there's a line that says the client owns partial rights to the software." "I think it might be an error," Lena frowned. "That's not your area." "The legal team already reviewed it," he nodded. "Of course. I just thought it sounded a little off." Her tone grew colder. "Let's focus on your actual job, okay?" The room went quiet. He apologized and went back to writing. The others avoided eye contact, and the meeting continued as if nothing had happened. But one of Lena's team members glanced at her nervously, sensing her temper rising. After the meeting, she muttered to a colleague, "These temps think they know everything," after reading one document. Her coworker shrugged and changed the topic. That evening, as the office emptied, the new man stayed behind again. Lena passed by and noticed him still at his desk reviewing some legal files. She couldn't help but ask, "Do they pay you overtime for this?" He smiled faintly. "No, I just like to make sure things are right." "Well, don't waste time on what's not your job," she said. Turning away, he didn't respond, only nodded politely. Days turned into weeks, and Lena's workload kept increasing. The company was preparing for a major contract renewal with a long-term client, a deal that could define the next few years for everyone involved. Lena was in charge, and she wanted everything perfect. One morning, her boss called her into his office. "Lena, we're assigning the new temp to assist you with the contract documentation," he said. She was stunned. "The temp? With all due respect, sir, I don't need help from an assistant." Her boss smiled. "He has a background in law. He might be useful. And besides, you could use an extra pair of eyes." Lena forced a smile and nodded, but inside she was irritated. She didn't like the idea of someone checking her work, especially not someone who was beneath her in position. That afternoon, she called him into her office. "You'll be helping me with the client's contract. I'll send you the files. Just review them quietly and send me notes. I don't want unnecessary discussions or debates." "Of course," he said calmly. "I'll only share what I find important." As they began working together, Lena noticed that he was incredibly detailed. He would point out small things, missing signatures, misplaced commas, unclear terms, all the things she thought were too minor to worry about. At first, she ignored most of his comments. But one day, while reviewing his notes, she saw that he had caught a major error that could have cost the company thousands. She corrected it, yet still didn't give him credit. When her assistant praised her for finding the mistake, she simply said, "That's what experience teaches you." But somewhere deep down, she started to feel uneasy. How could a temp notice things she missed? She told herself it was luck. Still, she began reading his notes more carefully each time. One evening, as they worked late in the conference room, she caught herself glancing at him. His calm focus irritated her but also made her curious. "Where did you say you worked before this?" she asked. He smiled politely. "Here and there, mostly as a consultant. For big companies? Sometimes," he replied, his tone casual. "You don't seem like the type who'd enjoy working under someone," she said. He chuckled softly. "I don't mind it. You learn a lot by seeing how people lead." She didn't know what to say to that. There was something about the way he said it that felt layered, like it meant more than just the words. She changed the subject quickly. Over the next few days, their communication became routine. He sent her his notes every morning, and she reviewed them quietly. She never thanked him, but she stopped ignoring his suggestions. Around the office, people started to notice small changes. Lena wasn't as harsh as before. She still demanded perfection, but she had started asking for opinions instead of shutting them down. Nobody understood why, but something about the calm temp seemed to have a quiet effect on her. One day, while waiting for a meeting to start, two employees whispered near the coffee machine. "Did you know that Temp has a law degree?" One said, "What, really?" "Yeah." Someone said he used to work for a big firm before taking a break. Lena overheard them but pretended not to care. Still, her mind began to wonder. Why would someone with that background take a temp job? That question stayed with her longer than she expected. By the end of that month, the contract draft was almost done. Her boss praised her for the progress. The client's representatives were coming next week to finalize everything. Everyone was excited. It was going to be one of the biggest deals of the year. That night, as she reviewed the final version of the contract, she noticed another note from the temp at the bottom of the file. It said, "Clause 12, consider reviewing ownership rights section carefully. Possible risk," she sighed. "Always with the warnings," she murmured, setting the paper aside. He might be smart, but she believed she knew the company better than anyone. Besides, she had checked that clause already, or at least she thought she had. She left the office late, locking her drawer with the confidence of someone who believed nothing could go wrong. The next morning, she saw him at his desk again, quietly sipping tea. He greeted her with a smile, and she nodded in return, something she had never done before. He didn't say much, but there was something in his eyes, like he knew what was coming. At that moment, Lena had no idea that the man she looked down on would soon become the person who would change everything. She had no idea that the same quiet man she barely noticed would soon hold her career and her reputation in his hands. For now, she still believed she was the one in control. The following week began with heavy rain and heavier deadlines. Everyone in the office seemed tense. The contract with the new client had to be ready by Friday, and every department was depending on Lena to make it happen. Her name was on the front page of the document, and she knew if it went well, it could bring her another promotion. She arrived early each day, always before the rest of her team. Her desk was covered with papers, sticky notes, and files marked with colored tabs. She didn't trust anyone else to handle the important details. For her, perfection was the only acceptable result. The temporary assistant, the man everyone now simply called the quiet one, continued to help her from the legal side. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words carried weight. He had this habit of reading through every line slowly, as if he could hear what the paper was trying to say. Sometimes Lena found it strange how he noticed the smallest things others ignored. That Monday morning, he came into her office holding a thin folder. "I went through the new draft," he said softly. "There's something you might want to see." Lena didn't look up. "Leave it on the desk. I'll check it later." He set it down carefully and said, "Clause 9, the one about renewal terms. There's a phrase that could give the client too much control if not clarified." I highlighted it. She gave a short nod. "I'll handle it." He smiled slightly. "Of course." When he left, she stared at the folder for a moment, then turned her eyes back to her laptop. She didn't like that he always found something. It made her feel as though she wasn't careful enough, and she didn't enjoy that feeling. Still, late in the evening, she opened the folder out of curiosity. There, in his neat handwriting, was a short note explaining why the clause could be risky. It wasn't written in complicated language, just clear, simple reasoning that made perfect sense. She frowned but couldn't deny he was right. The next morning, during a review meeting, Lena presented the revised version of the contract. Her boss nodded approvingly. "Good catch on that renewal clause," he said. "That could have caused serious issues later." She smiled but didn't say who had found it. When the meeting ended, she caught sight of the quiet man outside organizing files. For a moment, guilt flickered in her chest, but she brushed it aside. Over the next few days, they worked side by side more often. He never demanded recognition, never tried to show off. He just did his work with calm focus. Sometimes when everyone else had gone home, they were the only two left in the office, the sound of typing and rustling papers filling the silence. One night, as the rain hit the windows, she sighed and leaned back in her chair. "Do you ever get tired of this?" she asked suddenly. He looked up from his notes. "Of what?" "Work, deadlines, constant pressure." He smiled faintly. "Not really. I like what I do. It's not about pressure for me. It's about purpose." "Purpose?" she repeated. He nodded. "If I can make something better, fix what others miss, it feels worthwhile." She tilted her head. "You sound like someone who's already done this for a long time." He didn't answer right away. "Maybe I have," he said finally, his tone quiet. Lena found herself studying him for a moment. There was something steady about him, something unshakable. It made her wonder who he really was. Later that week, she overheard two employees talking near the elevator. "That temp is sharp," one said. "Did you see the way he corrected the finance department's report yesterday?" "Yeah, I think he knows more than half the legal team," the other replied. Maybe he used to be a lawyer or something. Lena didn't join the conversation, but the thought stuck with her. That evening, she searched through the company records. His profile was almost empty. No past positions, no background details. Just his name, his temporary role, and his contract end date. That was it. It puzzled her. People with his kind of knowledge usually came with long resumes and strong opinions. But he seemed uninterested in status. He did his work quietly, left on time, and never asked for more than what was assigned. As the contract deadline drew closer, the tension in the office grew. Everyone wanted the deal to go smoothly. The client was big, their lawyers were strict, and even the smallest mistake could cause weeks of trouble. On Thursday evening, as the final review began, Lena was going through the last batch of documents with him. She noticed he had marked several small notes again, not errors but things that could make the agreement clearer. "You really don't miss anything, do you?" she said, half smiling. He looked up with that calm expression again. "Details tell stories. Sometimes what's hidden in the small print changes everything." She chuckled lightly. "You talk like you've seen it happen." "I have," he said simply. Something about his tone made her pause. It wasn't prideful. It was matter-of-fact, like someone who had learned from experience. She wanted to ask more, but the moment passed as her phone buzzed with another message from her boss. When she turned back to him, he was already focused on the document again. By Friday morning, the office buzzed with nervous energy. The client's representatives were scheduled to arrive at noon. Lena felt confident but anxious. This deal meant everything. As she printed the final version of the contract, the quiet man came by her office. "I just went over the last few pages," he said carefully. "There's one line in Clause 12, about product ownership rights. You might want to double-check it before the meeting." She frowned, already frustrated by the morning chaos. "I've checked it twice." "It's fine, I know," he said gently. "It just seems open to interpretation. If the client pushes it, they could..." She cut him off. It's fine. We've spent enough time on this. I trust my judgment. He didn't argue. He simply nodded and said, all right. I hope everything goes well. When he left, she felt a strange tension in her chest. She told herself she wasn't angry, just tired. But something about his calm confidence made her defensive. At noon, the conference room filled with the client's representatives, company executives, and senior staff. Everyone shook hands and exchanged polite smiles. The atmosphere was formal and heavy. Lena led the presentation smoothly. She explained every point clearly, showing slides and graphs. The clients seemed pleased and everything appeared to be going exactly as planned. When it came time to sign the contract, Lena handed out copies confidently. The lead client lawyer skimmed through the pages, then looked up. Everything seems in order, he said with a smile. Relieved, Lena passed him the pen. The signing went smoothly and applause filled the room. Her boss congratulated her on another success. The moment felt like a victory, the kind she had worked for all her life. That evening, the office celebrated. People clapped her on the back, thanking her for her leadership. She smiled, though her thoughts briefly wandered to the quiet man who wasn't there. She assumed he'd already gone home. When she walked past his empty desk, she noticed something. A folded note left under her folder. Curious, she picked it up. It read, "Sometimes what we overlook today becomes the lesson we face tomorrow. Check clause 12 again when you have time." She sighed, shaking her head. Still on about that, she muttered, slipping the note into her bag. Over the weekend, she didn't think much about it. She spent her days resting, catching up on sleep and preparing for the official contract announcement on Monday. She told herself everything was fine. The deal was done and the client was happy. But Monday morning brought a different tone. The company's director called her into his office, looking serious. "We've got a problem," he said, sliding a document across the table. She frowned, recognizing the same contract she had proudly presented. "What's wrong?" The client's legal team sent an email. They're interpreting Clause 12 to mean they now share partial ownership of our software. They're claiming rights we never intended to give. Lena's heart dropped. "That's impossible. That clause was clear." "It wasn't clear enough," the director said quietly. "And they're refusing to back down." She felt her chest tighten. Her mind flashed back to the note she had ignored. The one warning she brushed off. "The temp mentioned that clause," she whispered almost to herself. "What temp?" the director asked. She looked up slowly, realizing how foolish she must sound. "The temporary assistant from the legal department. He warned me about it," the director frowned. "There's no temp assigned to legal now. His contract ended Friday evening." She blinked. "Ended? Just like that?" He nodded. "He didn't even wait for payment. Said he had another assignment." Lena left the office feeling dizzy. The hallway felt longer than usual. She sat down at her desk, opened the contract file again, and there it was in the line she had ignored. A small phrase, simple yet powerful, now threatening the company's control over its own creation. As she stared at the words, she realized the truth. The man she looked down on had been the only one who saw what she missed. For the first time in years, she felt the sharp sting of regret. Not because of the mistake, but because she had refused to listen. She leaned back in her chair, the echo of his calm voice in her memory. Sometimes what's hidden in the small print changes everything. She finally understood what he meant. The office that Monday felt heavier than usual. People walked quickly, speaking in low voices. The sound of keyboards and phones blended into a background hum of worry. Lena sat in her chair, staring at the same page for almost an hour. The mistake in the contract was small, just a single phrase, but the damage it caused was massive. The client's lawyers had already taken advantage of it. They claimed shared ownership of the company's software system, something Lena never intended to give away. Now what was supposed to be the biggest deal of her career had turned into a disaster. Her phone buzzed nonstop with calls from senior management. Every department was asking questions. The finance team wanted to know how much it could cost. The legal team was trying to find a way out, but no one had a clear answer. Her boss called her into his office again. "We can't afford to lose this deal," he said sternly. "The client's already spreading the word. It's embarrassing for us." "I know," she said quietly. "I'm working on it." "Working on it?" His voice rose slightly. "You were supposed to double-check everything, Lena. How could this happen?" She didn't have an answer. Her mind was spinning. She wanted to tell him about the warning she'd ignored. But what good would that do now? The man who gave it was gone, and his note sat crumpled in her drawer, the one she had never taken seriously. After the meeting, she went back to her desk and pulled out the note again. The handwriting was neat, steady. "Check clause 12 again when you have time." She ran her fingers over the words, feeling a lump form in her throat. He had seen this coming. He had tried to tell her, and she had shut him down. By afternoon, the legal department confirmed what she already feared. Fixing the problem wouldn't be easy. The clause had been signed by both parties, and the client refused to amend it. They wanted to keep their new advantage. The company's director called an emergency meeting. Everyone gathered in the boardroom, department heads, lawyers, and executives. Lena sat near the end of the table, her stomach tight. One of the senior lawyers spoke first. "We might need to renegotiate the contract. It'll take time and cost money, but it's the only way." The director nodded grimly. "Do whatever it takes. Contact an external consultant if necessary. We need someone who specializes in corporate law." Lena sat silently, feeling smaller than she ever had. She had built her career on confidence, on the idea that she was always right. Now that confidence had turned into her biggest weakness. That night, long after everyone had gone home, she stayed in the office alone. The city lights flickered outside the tall windows. The silence felt like a punishment. She opened her laptop and began reviewing every email, every note, every comment the temporary assistant had made. He had been careful, thoughtful, precise. Every suggestion he gave made sense. Every warning had purpose. She realized she had ignored not just his words, but his insight, his quiet wisdom that could have saved her from all this. She leaned back, covering her face with her hands. "Why didn't I listen?" she whispered. The next morning, she came to work early again. She wanted to fix it somehow. But when she arrived, she found the director already in the conference room, speaking with someone. From where she stood, she couldn't see the person's face, but she could hear the tone. Calm, confident, familiar. When the director waved her in, she froze at the doorway. The man sitting across the table was the same one she had dismissed weeks ago. The quiet temp who used to bring her documents and correct her drafts. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. But there he was, dressed in a crisp suit, speaking with authority. The director stood up and said, "Lena, meet our new legal consultant. He's here to help us fix the contract issue." Her mind went blank. She stared at him, trying to understand what was happening. He smiled politely, his eyes steady but kind. "Hello again," he said softly. She swallowed hard, forcing a small nod. "You're the consultant?" "Yes," he replied. "I was working as a temporary assistant for observation purposes. Sometimes it helps to see how things function from the inside," the director continued, unaware of the tension between them. "He came highly recommended by one of our partner firms. He's already reviewed the documents and found a possible way out." Lena could barely process the words. The man she had looked down on, the one she had dismissed and ignored, was now sitting across from her as the company's savior. As the meeting continued, he calmly explained how they could challenge the clause. He pointed out legal interpretations that favored the company, offering solutions that no one else had considered. Everyone listened closely. Even the director nodded in agreement, impressed by his clarity. Lena said very little. She felt her chest tighten with a mix of shame and disbelief. Every sentence he spoke reminded her of how wrong she had been. After the meeting, the director clapped him on the shoulder. "Brilliant work. If we pull this off, we'll owe you a lot." He smiled humbly. "Just doing my job." When they stepped out of the room, Lena followed him down the hallway. "Wait," she said quietly. He turned to face her. His eyes were calm as always. "You knew," she said. "You knew this could happen." He nodded slightly. "I warned you." She looked down. "I should have listened." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he said gently, "Sometimes people don't listen because they think they already know enough. But knowledge without humility can be dangerous." His words stung. Not because they were harsh, but because they were true. That evening, they worked together again, just like before, but everything felt different. Now she was the one asking questions, and he was the one guiding her through the legal maze. He never once mentioned her mistake or used it against her. He simply focused on solving the problem. At one point, she asked quietly, Why did you work here as a temp? Someone like you could have walked in as a consultant from the start. He smiled faintly. I like to understand the people I help. Sometimes you see the truth of a company not from the top, but from the bottom. She thought about that for a long time. Over the next few days, they worked around the clock, preparing for renegotiation with the client. The tension was still high, but for the first time, Lena felt she wasn't alone in the fight. She began to rely on his guidance, to respect his insight, to truly listen. On Thursday, the new meeting with the client took place. This time he led the discussion. His voice was calm but firm. He explained how the clause could be interpreted differently under the law, pointing out that the client's claim over the software wouldn't hold in court. The client's lawyers tried to argue, but he remained composed. He presented facts, not emotion, and by the end of the meeting, even they began to soften their tone. After 2 hours, the deal was renegotiated successfully. The company regained full ownership, and both sides signed the corrected version. When it was over, the director shook his hand with gratitude. You saved us, he said. We were lucky to have you. Lena stood nearby, silent, her eyes lowered. She felt a mix of relief and humility. The mistake that once threatened her career had become her greatest lesson. Later that day, she found him standing by the window looking out at the city skyline. She approached slowly. I don't know how to thank you, she said quietly. You don't need to, he replied. Just remember what happened. Mistakes can teach more than success ever will. I was proud, she admitted. Too proud to listen. He turned to her, his expression soft. You're not the first. We all learned that lesson in our own time. There was no anger in his voice, not just understanding. And somehow that made her feel even more ashamed. Before he left, he handed her a small envelope. For you, he said. It's nothing important. Just something to think about. When he walked away, she opened it slowly. Inside was a short note that read, Respect isn't about position. It's about perception. When you start seeing people for who they are, not what they do, everything changes. She folded the note carefully and slipped it into her notebook. That night, as she sat alone in her office, she thought about how much her view of people had changed. She used to measure worth by titles and salaries, by who spoke the loudest or dressed the best. But the person who had truly made the biggest difference was the one she had ignored the most. The next morning, the office was buzzing again, but this time with relief. The crisis had passed. People congratulated her for how well the company recovered. Her boss even thanked her for handling things maturely. She smiled politely, but inside she knew the truth. She hadn't saved anything, and he had. Still, she carried no bitterness about it. Instead, she felt grateful. Because in losing her pride, she had gained something far more valuable: perspective. As she walked past his now empty desk, she paused for a moment. The chair was neatly pushed in, the desk spotless, as if he had never been there. But for her, his presence had left a mark that wouldn't fade. For the first time in years, Lena didn't feel taller because of her position. She felt grounded, human, and deep down she knew that the quiet man she once looked down on had, in the end, lifted her higher than anyone else ever could. Days had passed since the disaster with the contract. The entire office felt heavy. People whispered in corners, afraid to mention the deal that had gone wrong. The company had lost a lot of money, and everyone knew who had signed that paper: Lena. Her name had been on the documents, her signature right under the faulty clause. She sat in her office, staring at the same wall for hours. The once proud and confident woman now looked tired, her usual sharpness gone. She had replayed that moment over and over, the way Adrian had tried to warn her, the way she brushed him off with a cold smile. It burned inside her. She wanted to fix it, but it was too late. He was gone. After the incident, Adrian had quietly submitted his resignation letter. No drama, no arguments. He simply wrote a polite note thanking the company for the opportunity and left without saying goodbye to anyone. Lena didn't even get the chance to apologize. The company, now desperate, had hired an outside consultant to handle the mess and renegotiate with the client. Meetings were scheduled, calls were made, and the atmosphere was tense. Lena knew her job was on the line. Her boss had stopped looking her in the eyes. Every time she entered a room, conversation seemed to pause. The day of the meeting came. The board members, lawyers, and department heads all gathered in the large glass conference room. Lena stood near the back, clutching her files tightly, hoping to learn something, maybe find a way to redeem herself. When the door opened, everyone looked up. A tall man in a navy blue suit stepped in confidently, carrying a folder under his arm. His calm expression didn't show any nervousness. He looked completely at ease, as if he belonged there. Lena's heart stopped for a second. It was Adrian. For a moment, she thought her mind was playing tricks on her. But it was him, the same man she used to send for coffee, the same man she ignored, the same man she thought was beneath her. Only now everything about him looked different. His presence filled the room in a way it never had before. His posture, his quiet confidence, and it all demanded respect. Everyone greeted him warmly. The CEO himself shook his hand. "We're so glad you could make time for this, Mr. Adrian," he said. "Mr. Adrian." Lena's throat tightened. She had never heard anyone call him that. He gave a small nod and began setting up his documents at the head of the table. Lena stood frozen, unsure if she should hide or face him. Adrian started the meeting by calmly explaining the issues in the previous contract. His tone was professional, direct, and clear. He didn't point fingers or try to embarrass anyone. He focused only on facts and solutions. As he spoke, everyone listened. Even the senior executives leaned in, taking notes. Lena couldn't help but watch him. The quiet man she used to dismiss was now commanding the entire room. Every point he made was logical and sharp. Every word carried weight. When he presented the corrected clauses, Lena felt her stomach twist. He had fixed the exact parts she had ignored. It was like watching a mirror of her own mistakes. Only this reflection spoke with grace and authority. At one point, the CEO turned toward Adrian and said, "How did you know about these gaps?" "Even our senior lawyers missed them." Adrian smiled slightly. "Sometimes the details are hidden in plain sight. You just have to be patient enough to read between the lines." His words hit Lena like a quiet reminder. She remembered how she used to rush him, how she never gave him a chance to explain. The meeting lasted for more than 2 hours. By the end, Adrian had completely turned the situation around. The client agreed to new terms that not only fixed the loopholes, but also benefited the company even more. When the final papers were signed, applause filled the room. The CEO shook Adrian's hand again. "You just saved us millions," he said with genuine gratitude. "We owe you a lot," Adrian simply replied. "I'm glad to help." He didn't look proud or smug, just calm, almost humble. Lena stayed silent, still near the back. She felt small, almost invisible. But at the same time, she felt something shift inside her. Respect. True, deep respect. After the meeting ended and everyone began leaving, Adrian collected his papers quietly. For a moment, their eyes met. She froze, unsure what to say. He gave her a polite nod, the same kind of respectful nod she had never once given him when he worked under her. Then he walked out of the room. Lena felt a wave of emotion rush over her. Guilt, admiration, and relief all mixed together. She waited a few minutes before following him. She found him standing in the hallway near the elevator, looking at his phone. "Adrian," she said softly. He looked up, his expression calm. "Lena." She hesitated, unsure where to start. I didn't expect to see you here." "I was asked to handle the renegotiation," he replied simply. She nodded, struggling for words. "You did an incredible job in there." "Thank you," he said. There was silence for a moment. The elevator light blinked slowly above them. "Listen," she said finally, her voice trembling slightly, "about what happened before. I owe you an apology. I treated you terribly. I was arrogant. I thought I was above you. But I was wrong. Completely wrong." Adrian looked at her for a long moment. His expression wasn't angry, just thoughtful. "I know," he said quietly. "But sometimes people learn the hard way." Lena swallowed hard. "You tried to warn me and I didn't listen. I cost the company so much. I cost myself my own peace of mind." "You learned from it," he said softly. "That's what matters." She looked at him, tears in her eyes. "I don't think I'll ever forget how wrong I was about you." Adrian gave a small smile. "You don't have to. Just remember that respect should never depend on position." Before she could reply, the elevator opened. He stepped inside and turned slightly. "Take care, Lena," he said kindly, and then the doors closed. She stood there for a long time, staring at the closed elevator, lost in thought. That evening, as she sat at her desk, she found herself going through the files Adrian had once helped her with. Every note he had written, every correction, every careful observation, all of it showed how dedicated he had been. She realized he had never been trying to outshine her. He had only been trying to do his job right. The next few days were quiet. The news spread through the company about how Adrian had saved the deal. Everyone praised him. Some even said he might become a permanent consultant for the firm. Lena didn't mind. She was actually happy for him. For the first time in years, she felt genuinely humbled. She began to see her team differently, not as subordinates, but as people with their own talents and potential. She started listening more, asking for opinions and encouraging others. The change was slow but real. One afternoon, as she was cleaning her desk, she noticed a small white envelope under her keyboard. There was no name on it, but she recognized the handwriting immediately. Adrian's. Inside was a short note. It said, "True leadership isn't about who speaks the loudest, but who listens the most." Lena held the note in her hands for a long time. It wasn't long or emotional, but it meant more than any award or title ever had. She pinned it inside her office drawer, a quiet reminder of the lesson she had learned the hard way. Weeks later, during a casual company dinner, her boss announced that the company's new long-term legal consultant would be Adrian. Everyone clapped, including Lena. When he entered the restaurant, he smiled politely and greeted her like an equal. For a moment, they shared a brief nod. No awkwardness, no resentment. Just mutual respect. As the evening went on, Lena sat back and thought about how everything had changed. She realized that life had a strange way of teaching people lessons. Sometimes it humbles you through mistakes. Sometimes it sends someone into your path who changes your perspective forever. She once looked down on a man she thought was ordinary, but he turned out to be the one who taught her what real value means, not just in business, but in people. And that thought stayed with her long after the dinner was over, long after everyone went home. Because deep down she knew that one simple truth had changed her forever. Respect is not about power. It's about seeing worth in everyone, even when others don't. Months had passed since the day Adrian returned to the company as a consultant. Life inside the office had slowly gone back to normal. The loud tension that once filled the air had disappeared, replaced by a quieter, steadier rhythm. But for Lena, everything felt different. She didn't see the world the same way anymore. Every morning when she arrived at work, she greeted the receptionist with a genuine smile. She made time to talk to her team, to ask how they were doing, to listen. Before, she used to rush past people, too focused on deadlines and results. Now she understood that the real strength of any workplace wasn't just in numbers or achievements. It was in the people who made those things possible. Her colleagues began noticing the change. She wasn't the strict, cold manager they used to fear. She had become more patient, more understanding. When someone made a mistake, instead of scolding them, she helped them fix it. She gave people chances to grow, the same way she wished someone had given her one when she needed it. But even as life moved on, there was still one thing that lingered in her heart, the memory of how she had treated Adrian. No matter how much she tried to forgive herself, there was a part of her that still hurt when she thought about it. One afternoon, the company organized a seminar for its employees, a casual event where the new consultant, Adrian, was invited to speak about leadership and ethics in business. The announcement made everyone excited. He had gained quite a reputation after saving the company, and people respected him deeply. Lena sat quietly in the second row as he walked onto the small stage. The room filled with the sound of clapping hands. He looked composed as always, his calm voice carrying clearly as he began to speak. He didn't talk about numbers or success. He talked about people, about how every person in a workplace has value, no matter their title or background. He spoke about how arrogance can blind even the smartest minds, and how humility can open doors to real progress. As he spoke, Lena couldn't help but feel emotional. Every word hit home. It felt as though he was talking directly to her, not to embarrass her, but to remind her of what she had learned. At the end of his talk, he said something that stayed with everyone in the room. Power doesn't define leadership. Compassion does. Because the moment we forget the people we lead, we stop being leaders and become just bosses. The audience applauded again. But Lena just sat there quietly, her heart heavy with realization. After the seminar, as people gathered around Adrian to thank him or ask questions, Lena waited at the back of the room. She wasn't sure if she should go up to him again. They had spoken briefly since that day in the hallway, exchanged polite greetings during meetings, but they had never really talked. When the crowd finally began to leave, she walked toward him slowly. "Adrian," she said softly. He turned, smiling politely. "Lena, I'm glad you could come." "I wouldn't miss it," she replied. "You spoke beautifully." "Thank you," he said. "I just shared what I've learned along the way." She took a breath. "You've taught me more than you know." He looked at her quietly, waiting for her to continue. "I used to think being strong meant never admitting mistakes," she said. "But now I know that real strength is accepting them and learning from them." Adrian smiled faintly. "That's a lesson most people take years to learn." She looked down for a moment, then said, "I'm grateful that you came back. Not just because you fixed what I broke, but because you showed me who I really was and who I could become." He studied her face for a moment, then said gently, "Sometimes life gives us mirrors in the form of people. We don't always like what we see, but if we're brave enough to face it, we grow." She nodded slowly. His words were simple, but they carried so much truth. Before leaving, he handed her a small folded note. "Something for you," he said. "I think you'll like it." She took it, a little surprised. "What is it?" he smiled. "Just read it when you have a quiet moment." Later that evening, Lena sat alone at her desk. The office lights were dim, and most people had already gone home. She unfolded the small note. Inside, written neatly in his handwriting, were the words, "Mutual respect builds lasting partnerships." It was the same line from the contract they once argued about, the one she had ignored. She laughed softly to herself, not because it was funny, but because of how deeply it now made sense. She realized that those words weren't just meant for business. They were a rule for life. From that day forward, Lena lived by that line. She carried it like a quiet promise, to never look down on anyone again, to never assume someone's worth based on their job title or appearance. Over the next few months, the company began to grow again. The new deals went smoothly, the team worked better together, and there was a stronger sense of unity. People felt valued. For the first time in years, Lena felt proud, not of her position, but of the kind of person she was becoming. Adrian continued working as a consultant, helping the company on major projects. Their relationship turned into one of mutual trust. She respected his insights, and he respected her efforts to change. Sometimes they had coffee together after meetings, discussing work, life, and the little lessons both had learned along the way. One evening, after a long meeting, they walked out of the building together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. There was a calm silence between them. "You've really changed," Adrian said after a while. She smiled faintly. "For the better, I hope." "For the wiser," he corrected. She laughed softly. "That's generous of you to say." "I mean it," he said. "People rarely admit their mistakes and grow from them. But you did. That takes courage." She looked at him, genuinely touched. "You were my lesson, Adrian. Sometimes the universe sends the right person at the right time to humble you. That's what you were for me." He smiled and nodded. "And maybe you were my reminder too, that patience pays off." They both laughed quietly, the tension between them gone, replaced by an unspoken understanding. As they reached the parking lot, Lena turned and said, "You know, I used to believe success was about being the smartest person in the room. But now I know it's about being the kindest one." He looked at her, the fading sunlight reflecting in his eyes. "That's a kind of success not everyone achieves." She smiled. "Well, it's never too late to learn." They said goodbye and went their separate ways, but the conversation stayed with her long after she got home. That night, she wrote a small note to herself and pinned it near her bed. It said, "Never look down on anyone unless you're helping them rise." It became her daily reminder. Years later, when she eventually became a director at the company, she carried that same mindset. Her team adored her for her fairness and warmth. Whenever new employees joined, she personally welcomed them, making sure they felt comfortable. People often said she was the kind of leader everyone wished they had, And sometimes when she saw a new,